You already spent like 25 minutes last time talking about blend modes in GameMaker. You really gonna do it again? Oh, you have no idea how far the rabbit hole goes on this, do you? Hello all you crazy people out there, my name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome back to talking about color and blending in GameMaker. So last time I talked about the basic blend modes that GameMaker makes available to you. So that would be normal blending, additive blending, subtractive blending, and max blending. Max blending I'm going to, for the most part, pretend just doesn't exist in this video because I just don't like it. I'm not a fan of how it looks, and I can't say I know anyone who's ever actually had a use for it. And today we are going to talk a little bit about the GPU set blend mode extended function and how this works and how this differs from normal blending. So there's a couple omissions that you might notice when it comes to just GPU set blend mode. In particular, people tend to be a little bit surprised that multiplicative blending is not listed as one of the simple blend modes in GameMaker. You can do multiplicative blending in GameMaker, it's just you have to use the advanced blend modes to do it. You can't just use a simple blend mode, and I'm probably going to be using that as my main example for what we'll be doing in this video. If you haven't seen the last video that I made on an introduction to blend modes in GameMaker, I recommend going and watching that. I talked about math in that video, and I will be talking about math again in this video. So if you remember the explanation of the math that I gave for the normal blend mode, I said that you could think of it as a linear interpolation from the destination color, which is the color of what's already there, to the source color, which is the color that you're trying to draw, with the interpolation amount being the source color's alpha. And I also said that perhaps the more correct explanation of the normal blend mode is that you would take the source color multiplied by the source alpha, and you would add that to the destination color multiplied by the difference of 1 minus the source alpha. When you add those two color values together, that would be the output color, which is going to be the same result as the lerp, but it might be considered a little bit more mathematically correct. The reason that I said the second version of that equation is perhaps a little bit more accurate is because the general shape of that equation, so if you take the source color multiplied by something and take add it to the destination color multiplied by something, that general shape of an equation is at the heart of what underpins the GPU set blend mode extended function, and blending colors in computers in general. And it's so important that I'm going to leave it at the top of the screen for probably the rest of this video. So, GPU set blend mode extended is going to take two arguments, the source and the destination. These two arguments are going to be different factors that you're going to multiply the source and the destination colors by before you add them together. If you hit BM control space to bring up this drop-down list full of blend mode constants, you're going to see not only BM normal, BM add, and so on and so forth, but you're also going to see a couple of other things that I did not mention last time, such as destination alpha, destination color, inverse destination alpha, so on and so forth. A lot of these are somewhat self-explanatory as to what they do, but not all of them, and I'll get to them in due time. It honestly kind of gets under my skin that GameMaker doesn't differentiate between the BM normal, BM add constants that you would pass to the regular GPU set blend mode function, and the blending factors for the GPU set blend mode extended function that we're going to be dealing with today, because having them in the same list like this kind of sends the message that they're equivalent and that you can use them both in both blend mode functions, but that's really not the case. They're really different concepts. But I digress. So before we get to recreating multiplicative blending and perhaps some other Photoshop filters using the extended blend modes, we are going to first recreate the simple blend modes. You can recreate all of the simple blend modes, so normal, additive, subtractive, and max, using the extended blend mode function. Performance-wise, it's the same. It's not any more expensive to use the extended blend mode functions than it is to use the normal blend mode function. This is just a bit of a shorthand for more common blend modes that you might want to do. So if we go back to the equation that we had for BM underscore normal, we had the source alpha being multiplied by the source color, and that is going to be the first argument in this function. So we can type in BM underscore source alpha as our blend mode factor for the first argument, and we had 1 minus the source alpha for the destination color, which we're multiplying it by, and we can represent that with BM inverse, where is it, source alpha, that one. So source alpha is just the alpha of the source color itself. Inverse source alpha is 1 minus the source alpha itself. Some of the other ones, source color, is going to be the source color itself. inverse source color is going to be, this is where it kind of helps if you think about colors in terms of numbers between 0 and 1 instead of between 0 and 255, as you would think of it in a shader. Because then the inverse source color just becomes 1 minus the source color, 1 minus the source RGB. But normal blending is just source alpha and inverse source alpha, and if we plug those two values into the equation at the top of the screen, we see the same thing that we had when we were doing normal blending in the last video. So if I have the mouse, if I have the duck follow the mouse around on the screen, then we will see that we have no particularly interesting blending happening. The colors are just appearing as you would expect them to. If I were to reduce the alpha of the duck by some amount, we would see that the colors of the duck and the colors of the tree are blended as you would expect. Also, if I move the duck over the differently colored bands on the screen. So that's the normal blend mode. So if we were to recreate the additive blend mode, we could do something pretty similar. Additive blend mode is the source color multiplied by the source alpha, so that we can account for transparency, and you add that to the destination color as it exists, and the destination color is not adjusted by the alpha of whatever you're trying to draw over it or anything like that. And we can represent that with bm_1. So this is going to be just a blending factor of 1 for the destination color. If you multiply the destination color by 1, you get the same value that you started with, and if you add that to the source color multiplied by the source alpha, you will get additive blending. You will get the colors added together, again accounting for the transparency of what you're trying to draw. So if I were to set this blend mode, and if I were to have the duckling moving over different parts of the screen, at the bottom, so the black rectangle is black. Black is just a bunch of zeros in terms of color. If you add a bunch of zeros of color to any other color, you'll get the starting color that you started with. And if I were to move the duck over the tree up here, we can see that we have achieved the same thing as we would have if we were to use additive blending. And if I were to comment this out and set the blend mode to bm_add, we're going to see pretty much the same result. So that's pretty cool. We've got additive blending. Okay, so if you want to imitate subtractive blending, this one might be a little bit less straightforward in how you convert the equation at the top of the screen into something that resembles subtractive blending, but you can still do it. So if we enter bm_0 for the source blending factor, and if we enter bm inverse source color for the destination factor, by multiplying the source color by bm_0, we effectively cancel it out of the equation, because we're multiplying it by 0, and that term just becomes 0, and we can pretty safely ignore it. And by multiplying the destination color by the inverse source color, the inverse source color being 1 minus the source color, that is what you would get if you took the color white and subtracted the source color from it. And if you multiply that by the destination color, you will get subtractive blending. And you don't have to worry about alpha in this case, because subtracting the source color from c_white will also account for alpha in this case. Because in this case, we're not only subtracting the color from 100%, but we're also subtracting the alpha from 100%. So if we were to run this now, we would see that if I were to move the duck over the tree, the duck is subtracting the yellow color from the tree, or I guess the red and the greens anyway. And if I were to move the duckling over the white, we would see the same thing. This is what we had when we were using subtractive blending last time. And the max blending, again, I don't have this one committed to memory, because I don't think it's worth memorizing, because I don't think I'm ever going to probably use it in my life. But if you want to achieve max blending, you would use source, what does it say in my notes over here? Source alpha for the source color factor, and inverse source color for the destination factor. And if I were to run this, we would see that we have something that looks a lot like bm_max. I'm really have no idea why they called it bm_max, because it sounds like calling it that sounds like it does one thing. It sounds like it takes the maximum value of each of the red, green, and blue values, but it doesn't. I believe there is a Photoshop blend mode that does do that, but that's not what bm_max does, and it's not something you can do with just GPU set blend mode extended, because it doesn't fit the shape of the equation that we've been making use of today. So I'm going to close out of that. And if you wanted to, if you want to take this further, you can use any combination of the 11 blend mode factors here. If I were to cross out the ones that you used in the normal blend mode function, you would be left with these. There are 11 of them, and you could put any one of them in the source and in the destination factors in GPU set blend mode extended, and that would give you a sum total of 121 combinations that you could pull from. And if we're being very honest, a lot of them aren't interesting. A lot of them just give you approximately the same color that you started with, or a lot of them will give you nothing at all, or a lot of them will give you just black, which isn't very useful. But there are a couple of gems in there, including the combination of blend modes that you would want to use if you wanted to achieve multiplicative blending, or some other Photoshop filters, Photoshop blend modes. So if you wanted to do that, what are we, like 10 minutes into this video, and I'm just now getting to the thing I promised at the beginning? If you wanted to do multiplicative blending is exactly what it sounds like. You take the source color and you multiply it by the destination color. And the obvious way, which you might think to do that, which will get you like 75% of the way there, but will fall flat in some obvious ways that we'll deal with in a minute, will be to take the source color and multiply that by BM destination color, and take the destination color and multiply it by BM underscore 0. So again, we multiply one of the factors by 0. That term in the equation becomes 0. We've essentially removed it from the equation. And what we're left with is the source color multiplied by the destination color. And that sounds pretty good, and in certain cases it will work, but if we have a sprite with any amount of transparency in it, it will not work. So if I were to open up Photoshop again and switch the blend mode of the duckling to multiply over here, we're going to see that we've got this, and if I were to put GameMaker next to it, we've got the same colors, but alpha is not being respected correctly, which I don't know about you, but I like it when alpha is accounted for when we're dealing with colors in GameMaker. So if I were to get out of there, and instead of setting the second term in the destination blending factor to BM underscore 0, we could set the second term to BM underscore inverse source, whereas inverse source alpha over here. And much like in some of the other blend modes that we talked about, this is just going to multiply the destination color by 1 minus the source color's alpha. In cases where the source color is fully opaque, in cases where the source color's alpha is equal to 1, 1 minus 1 is going to be 0, and we are going to cancel out the, and we're just going to be left with the destination color multiplied by the source color. But in cases where the source alpha has is a value that is less than 1, then we are still going to have some of the destination color shining through. And that is going to allow us to have, in cases where we have transparent pixels, or if we were to draw the duckling sprite with 50% transparency or something like that, that is going to cause the pixels that are behind it to be drawn as normal without being multiplied by 0, and consequently being drawn as black. Okay, so that's multiplicative blending. It's destination color inverse source alpha is something that you might want to write down somewhere if you use multiplicative blending for a lot of things. Another Photoshop blend mode that some people occasionally want to do in GameMaker is, where is it on this list? Screen. And screen, I don't entirely know how to describe in words. It's kind of like additive blending, but it's a little bit darker than additive blending. And if you want to accomplish something like this in GameMaker using blend modes, you can do that as well. The equation for screen is going to be a little bit similar to additive blending, so we're going to put BM underscore 1 in the source term, and BM underscore inverse source color in the second term. And if we were to run the game now, we would have something that looks an awful lot like the screen effect in Photoshop. So again, putting them side by side, something like this, we have the duckling being drawn as the screen effect. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Lastly, the last Photoshop blend mode that I'm going to talk about today is the one called linear dodge, and funnily enough, I believe this is just the same as additive blending. I don't know why Photoshop calls it this. I don't know why Photoshop doesn't put it at, like, you know, the top of the list, where the more straightforward ones are. Which one of these is subtractive? I have to assume Photoshop has like a subtractive blend mode. I don't know what it calls it though. Anyway, linear dodge is just additive blending. Again, if I were to run this little demo program and put these side by side with linear dodge and bm_add, this is just the same thing that we had. So if you've ever wondered exactly what goes into linear dodge, that would be this. All right, so I think that's gonna do it. A few final notes. Let's see. I kind of want to leave multiplicative blending as like what I have in my example here, because that's probably the most common thing that people are going to want to use this for. There is a second GPU set blend mode extended function called separate alpha, and all this does is it allows you to specify the blend mode factors that you multiply the color by and the blend mode factors that you multiply the alpha by separately. I've never had a use for this. Some people that I know have claimed they've had use for this. If you ever want to specify the alpha blending factor separately from the color blending factors, you can use it. Another thing of note is that you can do all of this with shaders. You can sample from 2 textures in a shader and combine the results like this. And this will allow you to do all the things you can do with GPU set blend mode extended and more. But the difference is that for the blending and shaders take place at different stages in the graphics pipeline, and you would have to set this up a little bit differently if you wanted to do it with the shader. You would have to pass it multiple texture samplers because you can't sample from the surface that you're drawing to in a shader. And blending happens at the end of that. Blending happens at the end of when the shaders are run. I think in some newer graphics APIs, you actually get a little bit more control over the like the blending stage of the draw pipeline, but GameMaker is currently on very, very old graphics API, so we can but dream. Anyway, that's going to do it for me for today. If you want the code for this, look for the GitHub repository down in the video description. If you want to mess around with this, feel free. I've also made, let's see, where is it? I've made a little tool if you have a bit of a hard time visualizing what blend modes do in your head. I've made a tool for previewing different blend modes. You can load in images and you can set blend modes to them, and you can see what they look like visually without having to like try to imagine them in your head or without doing the math yourself. People tell me when I say that I have a hard time visualizing blend modes, just do the math, you'll get the right answer. And like, yeah, I know that I'll get the right answer, but I don't want to do the math. That's a pain in the neck. And it doesn't help me picture the results in my head any better. So here's a tool for doing that, if you want. I'll have a link to that in the video description as well. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute towards these videos being made, look for links to that in all the usual places. You could see some fun things like your name in the credits at the end of every video. And about once a month I post a preview of my future plans, so if you wanted to pledge, I would definitely appreciate it. Otherwise, I try to post about 2 game dev videos a week. One tutorial like this. I like to talk about the weirder things you can do in GameMaker, such as graphical stuff and 3D stuff. And I'm also currently in the middle of a Let's Make a Game series in the form of a bullet shooter. So if any of that appeals to you, feel free to subscribe. I hope you all found that useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Army Armbuster, DJ Gibbles, Edward Holt, GameMaker, Gunnar Clovis, Keyexy, Posho, Sindra Larson, Squarecrow, Then Nothing Happened, and Zenjamin for supporting these videos. If you want to see your name in the credits or hear yourself shouted out at the end like this, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.